The final, hopeful notes of "Do you, Cole, take this woman?" still hung warm in the air. The velvet ring box had just cracked open in my fingers. Every eye in the room, the sweet, the sour, the morbidly curious, was glued to me and Leah. And then she moved, not toward me. The train of her obscenely expensive wedding dress was a frantic, white comet, dragging her through the stunned crowd. She crashed through a sea of guests, aiming with perfect precision for the figure lurking by the ballroom's side entrance, her so-called sworn brother, Billy Vance. She seized his hand, her grip so tight her knuckles were white, her nails digging into his flesh. "I'm sorry, Cole." She looked back at me, her voice trembling as tears fell in messy streams, ruining her makeup. "Billy, he can't live without me. I have to go with him." Dead silence. Some quick-thinking guest had killed the cheerful music, leaving a vacuum that sucked all the sound from the room. The breathing of several hundred people suddenly felt as loud as a blacksmith's bellows. I stood there, motionless. The velvet box in my hand felt like a block of ice. I watched Leah, saw the idiotic, reckless glow of a lovesick fool in her eyes, then looked at Billy. The kid couldn't meet my gaze, his eyes darting around nervously, but a smug, triumphant smirk was pulling at the corner of his mouth. He even gave a little theatrical sway, playing up his signature frailty. Suddenly, I laughed. It wasn't a laugh born of rage. It was genuinely, deeply comical. I gently closed the ring box. The soft click was terrifyingly loud in the oppressive silence. I started walking, my pace unhurried. The crowd parted from me like the Red Sea, their stares of shock, pity, and bloodlust sticking to my back. I walked right up to the star-crossed lovers. Leah instinctively shielded Billy, hiding him behind her like a mother hen protecting her chick. From the inner pocket of my tuxedo, I pulled out a checkbook and a Montblanc pen. Leaning against a nearby table set with a champagne tower, I wrote the number 1, followed by 6 zeros. I signed it, tore it from the book, and held it out to Leah between 2 fingers. "Take it." My voice was unervingly calm, almost gentle. "You're eloping, aren't you? You'll need travel money." Leah was completely floored. Her eyes went wide, darting from the check to my face as if she'd never seen me before. "Cole, you." Billy's eyes, however, lit up instantly. He stared at that light, heavy piece of paper, his throat working. Greed practically spilled from his gaze. "Bro," he began, his voice thin and fake. "Don't." I cut him off. I flicked the check. It fluttered past Leah's frozen fingers and drifted to the floor. "I can't bear the weight of that title." My eyes swept over them both, my voice low but clear enough for the front rows to hear. "I wish you both a pleasant journey." Without a second glance, I turned and walked back to the altar that was supposed to have been mine. I picked up a glass of champagne and even raised it in a toast to the petrified officiant. Leah stood frozen for a few seconds before she lunged, snatching the check from the floor. She grabbed Billy and practically stumbled out of the ballroom, a desperate and pathetic exit. The second they were gone, the room exploded. Holy hell, $1 million. He just gave it to them. Did he snap? Is he insane? That's one way to wear the horns, I guess. Pay for the privilege. Even a doormat has more pride than that. He's utterly humiliated. The whispers, the snickers, the undisguised mockery washed over me like a tidal wave. My former parents-in-law were ashen-faced, held up by a few of my friends to keep from collapsing. I stood at the center of the vortex and calmly finished my champagne. Placing the flute back on a server's tray with a crisp clink, I straightened my bow tie, faced the sea of pitying and contemptuous looks, and gave a slight nod. I didn't explain a single thing. There was no need. 3 months later, the hospital corridor reeked of antiseptic, the harsh fluorescent lights draining all the color from people's faces. Leah was kneeling on the floor. Her once perfect hair was a matted straw-like mess. The dress she wore was wrinkled and out of style. Her eyes were swollen like walnuts, and she was so thin she looked like a skeleton. She threw her arms around my legs with shocking strength, her voice a fractured, desperate wail. Cole, I was wrong. Please, you have to save Billy. He has leukemia. It's terminal. The doctor said if he doesn't get a transplant soon, he'll." She was sobbing, incoherent, snot and tears streaming down her face. "You're the only one who can save him. Please, for the sake of what we used to have, save him. I'll be your slave. I'll do anything. Please." I stood perfectly still, the fine fabric of my custom-tailored suit wrinkling in her grasp. A few nurses peeked around a corner down the hall. Slowly, I bent down and pried her fingers off me one by one. Her sobbing stopped abruptly. She looked up at me in disbelief, her eyes filled with absolute despair. I wasn't looking at her. I held my hand out to my side. A slender, beautiful hand with a flawless manicure slipped into mine. I gently pulled the woman standing beside me closer. She wore a simple, elegant white coat with a stethoscope around her neck. Her aura was cool and professional, but her eyes held a soft warmth when she looked at me. I smiled down at the crumpled, stunned woman on the floor. My voice was as calm as if I were commenting on the weather. Leah, I'd like you to meet Dr. Evelyn Reed, my girlfriend. I paused, then added with chilling clarity. She's also the lead consulting specialist for the National Marrow Donor Program, the foremost authority on hematological diseases in the country. Leah's pupils contracted to pinpricks. The blood drained from her face, leaving it a waxy, translucent white. Her mouth hung open, but no sound came out. I savored her expression, then continued slowly, each word a dull knife twisting. Oh, and about that $1 million check you used for emergencies. I met her gaze and watched the last flicker of light in her eyes shatter. Remember that GoFundMe you started for your dear brother 3 months ago? I gave a small, cruel smile. I was your most generous anonymous donor. Consider the $1 million a threefold return on my investment. Now, I said, pulling Evelyn closer as I turned to leave, we're even. I didn't look back. The crisp clicks of her heels and my dress, shoes echoed down the empty corridor. Behind us, there was a dead silence, followed by the raw, animalistic howl of a woman utterly and completely broken. Evelyn squeezed my fingers gently. I held her hand tighter and pushed open the fire door at the end of the hall. The sunlight outside was blinding. Leah's screams scraped against the hospital walls, each one a gut-wrenching cry of despair. I held Evelyn and didn't break my stride. The heavy fire door swung shut behind us, its dull thud cutting off the suffocating sound. The sudden, intense sunlight made my eyes water. Evelyn squeezed my hand again, her fingertips cool. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice low and calm with a professional's detachment, yet tinged with a subtle warmth. I shook my head, loosening my tie and breathing in air thick with exhaust fumes. "Just taking out the trash." She didn't press. She just walked with me in silence toward the parking garage. In the harsh light, her profile was sharp, her composure almost cold. Right now, that coldness was a strange comfort. My phone was vibrating nonstop in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Leah or her parents, finally realizing the true scope of the disaster they created. I turned it off. The world was blessedly quiet. "Shall I drop you at the institute?" I asked, holding the car door for Evelyn. She slid into the passenger seat, pausing as she buckled her seatbelt. She looked up at me. "You're not going to check on him? Your brother-in-law's case might be more interesting than his chart suggests." I froze, looking at her. A faint, cool smile touched Evelyn's lips. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, high risk, but some of his inflammatory markers and physical symptoms on admission. They're interesting. They don't present like a typical hematological onset." I started the car, the engine giving a low growl. In English, Evelyn. "It looks like acute organ failure," she said, her eyes fixed forward, her tone as flat as if she were analyzing lab data, possibly triggered by recent exposure to toxins or substance abuse. "Of course, we need more tests to confirm. Still, $1 million, 3 months. It's more than enough time for a gambler and a con artist to burn himself out completely." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't say a word as the car merged into traffic. The next day, I went to the office. The air was thick with tension. My secretary's eyes darted away as she set my coffee down. I ignored it, focusing on the backlog of paperwork. Just before 10, my office door was thrown open. Leah's parents, my former father and mother-in-law, rushed in looking haggard. With a thud, they dropped to their knees in front of my gleaming mahogany desk. Cole, you can't be this cruel." Leah's mother, Karen, was wailing, her hair a mess. "Billy is dying. He's Leah's brother. He's our whole world." Her father, Mark, was weeping, banging his head on the floor. "We failed as parents. We wronged you. Hit us, curse us, do whatever you want. But please save that boy. You're the only one who can." I leaned back in my chair, watching the melodrama with cold detachment. I remembered how they used to praise Billy in front of Leah, calling him thoughtful and caring, how they'd hint that since I had a big business, I should help out my future brother-in-law. I wondered if the floor felt cold on their knees. I didn't move. I just pressed a button on my intercom. "Security, please escort 2 visitors out." "Cole, you're not human. You're letting him die. You'll pay for this." Karen's shrill curses echoed down the hall as security dragged her away. Mark pointed a trembling finger at me, his face contorted in desperation. "That check. You gave it to her willingly. How can you?" The door closed, sealing off the noise. The world was quiet again. I picked up my coffee. It was cold and bitter. By the afternoon, the storm broke online. Someone had leaked a secretly recorded video from the hospital, edited for maximum incitement. It only showed me walking away coldly and Leah collapsing to her knees, paired with a sensationalist headline. Tech mogul's cruel revenge. Leaves ex-fiancé's dying brother for dead. An army of trolls descended, stoking the flames of public outrage. Are all rich people this heartless? So much for the generous act at the wedding. It was all a setup. He looks so polished, but his heart is pure evil. That poor girl. She escaped a monster. Find his info. Boycott his company. My phone blew up with messages from strangers. The company website was flooded with malicious comments. My head of PR stood before me, sweating profusely, asking for instructions. I scrolled through the vicious curses on my tablet and smiled. Do nothing. My director thought he'd misheard. Mr. Matthews. What? Let them scream, I said, tossing the tablet aside. The higher they build the bonfire, the more spectacular the crash. He left, completely bewildered. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the city below, a river of traffic and steel. The city is vast. The buzzing of insects never reaches this high. Late that night, my apartment doorbell rang incessantly, accompanied by a woman's hysterical shrieks. I opened the door. Leah stood there, looking like a ghost clawed up from hell. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she was clutching a crumpled lab report. Cole, she threw the paper at me. Look at it. Just look. This is Billy's life. You can hate me, but you can't just stand by and watch someone die. The paper fluttered to the floor. I didn't pick it up. Where's Evelyn? Where's that bitch? Get her out here. She's the expert, isn't she? Why won't she save him? She tried to force her way inside. I blocked her with one hand on the doorframe. Leah, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. Do I need to remind you how you took his hand and abandoned me at our wedding 3 months ago? She froze, her face turning chalk white. Do I need to remind you how your innocent, pitiful brother was spending my money while laughing behind my back about what an easy mark with deep pockets I was? Her breathing grew ragged, her eyes darting in panic. And do I need to remind you, I took a step forward, my gaze pinning her where every single dollar you took from me went? The casinos? The nightclubs? Or maybe it was those back-alley miracle drugs you bought that only accelerated his condition. Leah looked as if her bones had dissolved. She staggered back, her lips trembling. You? How did you know? How did I know? I laughed. It was my check. I have a record of every single transaction. I watched him rot piece by piece. I watched you patch up his messes again and again, until you threw yourself into the pit with him. Leah, my voice dropped to a cruel whisper. I'm not the one who refused to save him. You two paved this road to hell all by yourselves. Her eyes widened in horror. She was completely silent, as if struck by an invisible fist. I slowly closed the door, shutting out her twisted, desperate face. Leaning against the cold wood, I could hear her suppressed, animalistic sobs from the hallway, then the sound of her nails clawing frantically at the door. The sound was grating, but it soon faded. Finally, silence. She was gone. I bent down and picked up the crumpled lab report from the floor. After a cursory glance, I tossed it in the trash. Garbage belongs in the trash. My phone lit up. A text from Evelyn. Anonymous tip materials received. The evidence trail on Billy Vance's fraudulent use of donated funds is solid. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and HHS will be following up tomorrow. I replied, thank you. Another message came through. Preliminary search of the Marrow Registry is complete. Nationwide, there are 3 potential low-resolution matches. But whether a transplant can succeed will ultimately depend on the patient's own physical condition and further evaluation. I stared at the words, my eyes lingering on physical condition and evaluation. Understood. I put the phone away. Save him? I hadn't sealed the door shut completely, but whether he could grasp that microscopic sliver of hope that depended on his own merits. As for Leah, I went to my bar and poured a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid swirled around a perfect sphere of ice. She, her family, and her precious brother had humiliated me and stolen my money with their grand escape. Now it was time for them to pay it back, with interest, using the things they treasured most. This opera was just reaching its crescendo. I raised the glass to my lips. The whiskey was cold and sharp. Perfect. Before I'd finished my drink, my phone lit up again. Not an unknown number this time. It was Leah's mother, Karen. I answered. It wasn't a wail I heard, but a low, desperate hiss, the sound of a cornered animal. Cole, she said, her voice trembling, each word squeezed out. Leah's lost her mind. She's going to the media. She's going to say that you were abusing her before the wedding, mentally controlling her. That's why she had to run. She's going to show them fake medical reports, bruises. I swirl the ice in my glass, saying nothing. They were getting desperate, using the filthiest tactics possible to either force my hand or at the very least extort some hush money. Oh, my voice was light, intrigued. Let her. Karen was clearly not expecting that response. She was speechless. But give her a little friendly advice, I said conversationally. In this country, defamation is a serious civil offense. If those fake medical reports she's planning to show are used to solicit funds or support, that could easily cross the line into felony fraud, with multiple charges. The breathing on the other end of the line hitched. You're bluffing. Karen blustered, her bravado paper thin. Am I? Tell her to try me, I said with a soft chuckle. Oh, and by the way, let her know I have the detailed statements for her supplemental card. Specifically, the $800,000 medical deposit she charged at the private hospital where Billy was staying. I wonder how interested the media would be in a story titled, "Woman Uses Ex-Fiancé's Money for Lover's Medical Bills, Then Cries Abuse?" Dead silence on the line, broken only by heavy, ragged breathing. A few seconds later, the call was disconnected. I put down my phone and finished my drink. The ice sphere clinked against the glass. The next morning, I had just arrived at the office when my assistant followed me in, looking nervous. Mr. Matthews downstairs. Ms. Carter and her parents are here, with a few people who look like reporters. I raised an eyebrow. Reporters? More like online influencers. They're live streaming from their phones. I walked to the window and looked down. Sure enough, a small group was gathered at the entrance. Leah was being held up by her parents, looking pale and on the verge of collapse, sobbing to a man holding up a smartphone. The man was trying to push his way into the building while streaming, but our security guards were blocking him. The drama had escalated. When the online campaign failed, they brought the fight offline. Should I call the police, sir? My assistant asked. No need. I adjusted my cuffs. I'll go down and see them myself. The elevator descended. At the main entrance, the moment Leah saw me, her crying intensified. She sagged as if her legs had given out. Cole, you're so cruel. You've pushed me to the edge. I can't live like this anymore. The man with the phone immediately shoved it in my face, his voice charged with excitement. Mr. Matthews, do you have any response to Ms. Carter's accusations? Did you, as she claims, subject her to physical and psychological abuse during your relationship? The phone was practically touching my nose. Mark and Karen were chiming in from the side, weeping about how I was heartless and worse than an animal. I looked directly into the camera lens and smiled. Accusation. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their noise easily. Excellent. Since we have the media's attention. I looked at the streamer. How many people are in your stream right now? He was taken aback, glancing at his phone. Almost 100,000. Good. I nodded, taking a tablet from my assistant. Since Ms. Carter brought up the time before our wedding, I said, swiping a finger across the screen to pull up several files. I have here a few audio recordings. They feature conversations between Ms. Carter and her brother, Mr. Vance, in which they conspire to defraud me of significant sums of money. The topics include, but are not limited to, faking investment opportunities and fabricating a serious illness. Leah's sobs died in her throat. Her face went bone white. Furthermore, I continued, swiping again. Here are the records of numerous large-sum transfers from Ms. Carter to Mr. Vance during the time of our engagement, totaling over $3 million. The source of these funds was my personal account. The streamer's camera whipped toward Leah. She recoiled in terror, her lips trembling. No, that's not. It was. Additionally, I gave her no time to recover, turning my attention to her parents, regarding you too. Here are the receipts for the numerous loans you solicited from me under various pretenses, none of which were ever repaid. The total comes to $1,870,000. Should I read them out one by one? For instance, the money you claimed was for renovating your house last year, which was actually used to pay off Mr. Vance's gambling debts. Mark and Karen's faces turned a blotchy, purple red. Their mouths opened and closed, but no words came out. The live stream's comment section exploded. Holy shit. Plot twist of the century. This whole family is a bunch of leeches. Everyone who is hating on Matthews needs to apologize now. The audacity of these grifters is unbelievable. Swarm brother? More like parasitic lover. The streamer, holding his phone, looked back and forth, a mixture of embarrassment and thrill on his face. I looked at the ashen-faced Carter family, my voice turning to ice. As for abuse, Control. I unbuttoned my suit jacket. Facing the camera, I turned slightly and lifted the edge of my dress shirt, revealing a faded scar on my lower back. This is from our first year together. Billy got into a brawl, and I stepped in to stop it. I was stabbed by the other party. Leah begged me not to call the police, crying that it would ruin Billy's future. I agreed. I let my shirt fall, smoothed my jacket, and fixed my sharp gaze on Leah. This injury is far easier to verify than any of the fakes you've concocted. Leah collapsed completely, held up only by her parents' frantic grasp, shaking like a leaf in a storm. I stopped looking at them and waved a hand to the security guards. Clear them out. Then I turned back to the live streaming camera. Regarding Mr. Vance's medical condition, I said, my tone calm and measured, I have already tasked Dr. Evelyn Reed with providing all possible professional assistance to the relevant medical institutions. However, medicine has its limits and its protocols. Money cannot bend every rule. The outcome will depend on the patient's own condition and the judgment of his doctors. Finally, I paused, my gaze steady. My relationship with Ms. Carter is long over. My private life is my own. But if there is any further slander or harassment, I glanced at the terrified Carter family. My legal team will be more than happy to respond. With that, I turned and walked back into the building, leaving behind a stunned silence and the flashing lights of camera phones. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the chaos. My assistant followed me in. Mr. Matthews, the negative press online. Take the recording of that live stream, along with the evidence I presented, create a press release, and distribute it to every major outlet. My voice was flat. Emphasize keywords like grifters, family of leeches, and betrayal. Understood. 30 minutes later, Evelyn called. Sounds like you had a party downstairs, she said, her voice unreadable. It's been handled. I was watching the tide of public opinion turn violently on my computer screen. What's the situation on your end? Billy Vance's condition has deteriorated, Evelyn reported with clinical precision. Suspected septic shock and multiple organ failure. His body, weakened by previous substance abuse and general neglect, isn't tolerating the chemotherapy. Even if a perfect marrow match were found today, the success rate for a transplant would be less than 10%. Also, she paused. The FBI was here. They subpoenaed his medical billing records and the transaction details for some of the donated funds. The evidence against them is overwhelming. I leaned back in my chair, and Leah, she's posted outside his room. Looks like she's on the verge of a complete breakdown, Evelyn added coolly. And I just heard her parents were taken into custody. Conspiracy to commit fraud and fabrication of evidence. I was silent for a moment. They made their bed. Evelyn's voice came through the phone, clear and cold. Now they have to lie in it. I know. I looked out at the brilliant blue sky. What are you in the mood for tonight? I could almost hear a faint smile in her voice. Anything is fine, but I have an online seminar at 7. A new breakthrough in rare disease marrow matching. You'll have to wait an hour for me. Deal, I said. I'll make a reservation. I hung up. The office was quiet. The bloodbath on the internet, the life-and-death struggle in the hospital, the frantic tears in a police station. All of it was sealed away on the other side of the glass. I picked up my jacket and walked out. The elevator's mirrored walls reflected a man with no expression on his face. A carefully constructed persona? No, I was simply returning the shit I'd been fed in its original form, and making sure they would never even get a whiff of it again. 3 days later, I was on the VIP floor of the private hospital. The air was a suffocating mix of antiseptic and despair. From a room at the end of the hall came a muffled groaning, like the last whimpers of a dying animal. Leah was leaning against the wall outside the room. She was a hollowed-out version of herself, her eyes sunken, her fingernails bitten to the quick and bleeding. When she saw me, her eyes, dull and lifeless, swiveled slowly, as if she were seeing a ghost. He's not going to make it, she rasped, her voice thick and scratchy. The doctor said, the infection is too severe, his organs are failing. He won't last long enough for a transplant. I didn't reply, my gaze going past her to the room's window. Behind the glass, Billy lay tangled in a web of tubes and monitors, a skeletal figure with gray, waxy skin. Cole! Leah suddenly grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fabric of my suit. You can still do something, right? Evelyn is the expert. She must have a way. The best drugs. Put him on ECMO. Money is no object. I'll work for you for the rest of my life to pay you back. Please. I slowly pried her hand off my arm. The best drugs. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the empty hall with chilling clarity. 3 months ago, you were raising money on GoFundMe, claiming you needed an imported targeted therapy drug. $30,000 a vial, one vial a day. Leah's eyes widened in shock. You raised the money. A lot of it, I said, looking right at her. But from what I know, Billy never received a single dose of a legitimate drug. You bought generics from India, 3,000 a vial. As for their effectiveness, I glanced toward the hospital room. They don't seem to have worked out very well. Her face went deathly pale, her lips trembling. How do you? Where's the rest of the money? I asked. Over $700,000. Enough to buy plenty of the real medicine. Her body began to shake, her eyes darting away, unable to meet mine. Did you lose it gambling? Or did he use it to invest in another one of his get-rich-quick schemes? I took a step closer. Or did you just pocket it, thinking you could always squeeze more out of me later? No, she shrieked, her voice cracking. It was. Billy said those drugs were useless. He said he had a better way. And you believe everything he says? I cut her off, my tone dripping with contempt. Leah, is that a head on your shoulders? Or just a decoration? She looked like I'd slapped her, frozen in place, her breathing sharp and shallow. As for ECMO, I continued, my voice as flat as a weather report. That's 20,000 a day minimum. Add in immunosuppressants and specialty antibiotics, and you're looking at over 100,000 a day. How will you pay for that? Spin another sob story online? Or will you come back to me to perform your little act of undying love again? She opened her mouth, a guttural, choking sound escaping her throat, but she couldn't form a single word. I gave you a path, I said, looking into her eyes as the last glimmer of light within them died. I gave you money. I gave you chances. It was you, time and time again, who chose the dead end. Just then, the heart monitor in the room let out a long, piercing, continuous shriek. Beep. Nurses and doctors rushed into the room. Leah jolted as if electrocuted. She whipped her head around, and her body went limp, sliding down the wall to the floor as a broken, inhuman wail tore from her throat. A doctor worked for a few minutes, then came out, pulling off his mask. He looked down at the heap on the floor that was Leah and slowly shook his head. I'm sorry for your loss. Leah's wailing stopped. She looked up, her face completely empty. There was nothing there. I turned and walked away from that suffocating place. The elevator doors closed, and it began its descent. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Evelyn. We've traced the final $700,000 from Billy's account. Leah withdrew it in 3 separate transactions and deposited it into a new account under her mother's name. It happened last week. I stared at the message, my face a mask of stone. See, even at the very end, she was still scheming, still trying to secure a backdoor for herself. She just never imagined judgment would come so swiftly. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened, and sunlight flooded in. I walked out, took out my phone, and dialed a number. Mr. Evans, I said to my lawyer, the lawsuit I had you prepare, the one to reclaim all premarital assets, as well as the $1 million gift, you can file it with the court now. The targets are Leah Carter and all assets held in her parents' names. I want it done immediately. The long, flat tone of the heart monitor still seemed to be echoing in my ears. I didn't look back. The elevator's mirrored surface reflected my face, impassive, composed. My suit was immaculate, a stark contrast to the scene of howling, desperate grief I had left behind, separated from me by a wall of cold steel. My phone vibrated in my palm. Evelyn's message was as precise as a scalpel. Septic shock, multiple organ failure, resuscitation unsuccessful. Time of death, 14:37. I turned off the screen. The elevator doors opened to a bright, sterile lobby that smelled of coffee and disinfectant. A few reporters, like vultures sensing a fresh kill, tried to swarm me, but they were silently blocked by my security detail and assistant. Mr. Matthews, our condolences. Mr. Matthews, can you give us a statement? I didn't slow down, walking through the automatic glass doors and into the sharp afternoon sun. The wind was strong, whipping at the hem of my suit jacket. The car pulled up, and the driver opened the door. I got in, back to the office. The car merged smoothly into traffic. The city blurred past the windows, a cold, glittering, indifferent machine. My assistant passed a tablet to me from the front seat. The screen showed the top trending topics. Hashtag Billy Vance dead. Hashtag Cole Matthews responds. Hashtag real life farmer and viper. Hashtag reap what you sow. The court of public opinion had rendered its final verdict. The same people who had been screaming for my head were now turning their venom on Leah and her family, savaging even the dead man with a fresh wave of viciousness. Good riddance. Waste of oxygen. That whole family of leeches got what was coming to them. Matthews must have been blind to ever get involved with them. Why isn't that woman dead yet? Public opinion is a fickle, forgetful beast, always swinging from one extreme to the other. I swiped the page away and didn't look again. Sir, about Ms. About Leah Carter, my assistant said, cautiously. The hospital called her to handle the death certificate, but it seems she's disappeared. Keep an eye on her, I said, looking out the window. What about her parents? They've been formally arrested by the police. Conspiracy to commit fraud and fabrication of evidence. Given the amount of money involved, they're facing serious prison time. I grunted in acknowledgement. My phone vibrated again. An unknown number. I declined it. It rang again, persistent. I answered. The sound on the other end was a ragged, broken gasp for air, thick with tears. It was Leah. Cole. Billy. Billy's gone. She stammered, her voice shattered. They arrested my parents. The money. It's all gone. I have nothing left. I said nothing, listening to her whimper like a stray dog lost in the storm. It was you. It was all you. Her voice suddenly turned sharp and venomous. You let it die. You killed Billy. You destroyed my family. I hope you rot in hell. Cole, I'll haunt you forever. The curse was shrill, piercing. I waited until she was finished, until all that was left was her heavy, ragged breathing. Are you finished? I asked calmly. She went silent. Leah, my voice traveled through the phone, cold and hard as steel. You chose this path. You picked that man. You willingly handed over every dollar. The consequences are yours to bear. As for haunting me, I let out a soft, dismissive laugh. I wasn't afraid of you when you were alive. Why would I be afraid of you when you're dead? There was only a choked, disbelieving silence on the other end. I hung up and blocked the number. The world was quiet again. A week later, I stood on a hill in a cemetery, under the shade of a tall pine, watching a sparse, pathetic funeral below. A cheap casket, a few cemetery workers, and not a single friend or family member in sight. Leah stood by the edge of the open grave, dressed in wrinkled black, looking like a lost soul. She wasn't crying or making a scene. She just stared, her eyes fixed on the casket as it was slowly covered with dirt. The wind whipped her hair and clothes around a frame so thin it looked like it might blow away. She must have sensed me. Her head snapped up, her gaze shooting across the distance and locking onto my position. She was too far away from me to see her expression, but I could feel the bone-deep hatred radiating from her. I didn't move, meeting her stare. I held it until she finally broke, her head slowly bowing and her shoulders slumping, aging her 20 years in an instant. The workers finished their job and left quickly. She remained alone, a desolate statue, standing before a small, fresh mound of dirt. I turned and walked back down the hill. The black sedan was parked by the road. Evelyn was leaning against it, waiting. She wore a sharply tailored trench coat and sunglasses, and held 2 file folders. Is it over? She asked. Yes. I opened the car door. She got in, handing one of the folders to me. The final evaluation on the 3 potential marrow donors came back. 2 were disqualified for their own health reasons. The 3rd was not a viable match after high-resolution testing. Billy Vance's transplant options were, from a medical standpoint, completely closed. I flipped through the professional report without comment. That's the official conclusion, Evelyn added, her tone objective, as if reading from a lab summary. I see. I tossed the folder aside. She looked at me, suddenly taking off her sunglasses. Was there ever a moment you thought about saving him? I looked out the window. The cemetery was receding in the distance. No. My answer was immediate, without a hint of hesitation. Evelyn gave a small smile, not of mockery, but of understanding. She put her sunglasses back on. Let's go. The car started. She handed me the other folder. What's this? The court judgments for the asset recovery and the $1 million gift dispute cases came in, Evelyn said, her voice flat. They ruled in your favor on all counts. A lien has been placed on all assets belonging to Leah and her parents, including the $700,000 she tried to hide. The execution order will be issued concurrently. I glanced at the red seal on the judgment, then closed the folder. Also, Evelyn paused, a rare flicker of another emotion in her voice. My research institute has a new project. It's going to require me to be in Washington, D.C. for an extended period. I looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, her profile calm and beautiful. 6 months, minimum. The car was quiet for a moment. How often will you be back? I asked. The project is critical. Time will be tight, she replied. The answer was indirect, but perfectly clear. I was silent for a few seconds. Understood. The car left the suburbs and merged onto the highway, speeding toward the concrete jungle of the city. The world outside was a blur. My phone rang. It was my assistant. Mister, Matthews, we've identified the shell companies behind those online accounts that were spreading malicious rumors and doxing you and Ms. Carter. We've compiled all the evidence and are ready to file suit. Sue them, I said, my eyes on the road ahead. Sue them into the ground. Understood. I hung up. Evelyn was still looking out the window. She spoke softly. Sometimes I think you're terrifyingly calm. I didn't deny it. It's not about being calm, I finally answered after a moment. It's about calculation. Every choice has a price. They just couldn't afford to pay. The car pulled into the underground garage and came to a stop. In the dim light, I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to Evelyn. She turned to me, her eyes unreadable behind the dark lenses. I'll take you to a farewell dinner tonight, I said. She nodded slightly. Okay. I got out of the car. She didn't move immediately. I stood by the door and waited. The garage was empty and quiet, filled only with the low hum of the ventilation system. She finally stepped out, the sharp click of her heels on the concrete floor echoing as she came to my side. We walked toward the elevator together. Our reflections in the polished steel doors were perfectly matched, cool, composed, and governed by an almost ruthless sense of order. The past had been settled. The future was just beginning. The elevator doors slid silently shut.